Story 1. The Smile in the Reflection. There are places forgotten by time and people. Lonely islands of light in the middle of the vast American darkness. Gas stations in the Nevada desert are one of them. By day, they serve as a haven for weary travelers, but at night, they become beacons, attracting whatever hides in the gloom. This is the story of Leo, a 20-year-old kid who just wanted to get through his shift. He had no idea it would be his last. Leo hated the night shift, especially on Wednesdays. Traffic on Highway 95 practically died out after midnight, and his only companions were the hum of the old drink cooler and the whistle of the wind outside. The Desert Star gas station was a tiny world of concrete and glass, lost for dozens of miles in every direction. His boss, an old man named Hank, always said, "The main thing, son, is to keep the doors locked. At night in the desert, you never know if your customer is a person or something else." Leo had always dismissed it as old man rambling. Until tonight. The clock read 2:17 a.m. when a car slowly crunched onto the gravel driveway. It was an old, rusted sedan, the kind that should have been in a junkyard long ago. It stopped at the farthest pump, but its headlights didn't turn off, and the engine kept rumbling. Leo waited a minute, then two. No one got out. Just two dim headlights staring at him from the darkness, like a predator's eyes. Leo felt a chill run down his spine. Breaking protocol, he stepped outside, leaving the store door slightly ajar. The cold night air immediately bit at his skin. "Sir, need help with the gas?" he shouted against the headlights. There was no answer. Inside the car, only a dark silhouette was visible behind the wheel. It didn't move. Leo took a few more steps. "Is everything all right?" Silence. Was it his imagination, or did the silhouette shift slightly as if studying him intently in return? The feeling of unease grew into real fear. Leo quickly went back inside the store and bolted the door. His heart was pounding. He walked to the window and watched. 10 minutes passed. 20. The car remained in place. Suddenly, something crashed inside the store's back room. Leo jumped. He cautiously opened the door to the dark storage area filled with boxes. A package of paper towels lay on the floor. Probably a mouse. He closed the door, but the feeling of being watched intensified. He looked outside again, and his blood ran cold. The sedan's door was open. No one was inside. Where was the driver? He rushed to the window, scanning the lighted area. Empty. No one. He froze, listening, and then he heard it. Slow, shuffling footsteps right outside the store's wall. Someone was circling the building. Then the footsteps stopped at the front door. Leo backed away into the store, grabbing a heavy wrench from the counter. There was a quiet scrape. The doorknob slowly, creakily began to turn. The door rattled once, twice, and then came a bang, a powerful, dull thud that made the windows vibrate. Leo scrambled for the phone, dialing 911 with trembling fingers. "Yes, this is Desert Star Gas on the 95. Someone's trying to break in. Please hurry." As he spoke, the banging stopped. He cautiously peeked out the window. The sedan. It was leaving. Its headlights slowly dissolved into the night. 15 minutes later, the sheriff arrived. After checking the area, he just shrugged. No signs of a break-in, just a couple of scratches on the door. Probably some drifter trying to spook you. He yawned and, "You be careful out here, kid." After he left, Leo felt a wave of relief. He drank a cup of coffee, trying to calm his nerves. It was over. It was just some psycho. As he was taking a trash bag to the back room, he noticed something odd. The door was ajar. He was sure he had closed it. He flipped the light switch, but the bulb only flickered a couple of times and died. "Damn this wiring," he muttered and stepped inside using his phone's flashlight. The room smelled of dampness and something else, something sweet and wrong. He was about to leave when the beam of his flashlight slid across an old dusty mirror hanging on the wall. And for a second, he froze. In the reflection, standing right behind him, was a tall, dark figure. But that wasn't all. On its face was a wide, unnatural smile that stretched from ear to ear. Leo screamed and spun around, swinging the wrench. But there was nothing behind him, just shelves of merchandise. He was breathing heavily, his eyes darting from the empty space back to the mirror. The figure in the reflection was still there, and it was still smiling. And then the most terrifying realization hit Leo. It wasn't a reflection of something standing behind him. The creature was standing in the far, dark corner of the room where the light couldn't reach. The mirror was just catching its silhouette. It slowly took a step out of the darkness. It was tall, thin, with disproportionately long limbs, and it was smiling. Leo stumbled backward and fell. He scrambled desperately for the exit, but the creature blocked his path in a single leap. The last thing Leo saw was the smile on its face growing even wider, revealing rows of sharp, needle-like teeth. The security camera behind the counter only recorded the sound. Leo's scream, a crash, and the wet, tearing sound of something being pulled apart. Then silence. When the sheriff returned an hour later, drawn by a disconnected call from dispatch, he found no sign of a struggle. The doors were locked from the inside. The money in the register was untouched. Leo was never found. Officially, he's listed as a missing person. Hank sold the gas station a week later, vowing never to return to the desert. But sometimes, truckers driving past the abandoned Desert Star gas station at night say they see a lone figure in the dark windows of the store. They say it just stands there, watching the road and smiling. Shadow Notes. Story 2. The Forest Wakes at Sundown. There are jobs that require complete solitude. Fire lookouts are modern-day hermits, guardians of the wilderness. They spend weeks living in glass rooms, hundreds of feet in the air, watching over a silent, green ocean. Sarah loved this job. She loved the quiet. But she didn't know that the quiet has its own rules, and that some forests don't like being watched after sundown. The Two Forks Lookout Tower in Flathead National Forest, Montana, was her home for the summer. A 100-foot steel tower topped with a tiny 14 by 14-foot cabin with glass walls. By day, it offered a breathtaking view of miles of untouched wilderness. But at night, the world shrank to the small circle of light from her lamp, and everything beyond it became a bottomless, inky darkness. Sarah was a veteran. This was her 3rd season. She knew the sounds of the forest: the snap of a twig under a deer's hoof, the hoot of an owl, the distant howl of coyotes. These sounds comforted her. But on this night, the forest began to speak a different language. It all started as the last ray of sun disappeared behind the mountain ridge. Sarah was conducting her final sweep of the horizon with her binoculars, and that's when she saw it. About 3 miles to the north, in a deep ravine where no one should have been, a light flickered. A campfire. A strict fire ban was in effect at this time of year. She picked up her radio. "Central, this is Tower 2. I have a visual on an unauthorized campfire in Sector Nord Charlie." The dispatcher Gary's familiar raspy voice came back almost immediately. Copy that too. That's odd. No hikers are scheduled in that area. Can you describe what you see? Sarah raised the binoculars to her eyes again. I see the fire and figures. 3, maybe 4 of them. They're just standing around it, not moving. Understood. Keep an eye on them. I'll send a ranger unit out there first thing in the morning. Stay on the line. Over. An hour passed. The figures by the fire hadn't moved. Sarah tried to distract herself with a book, but her eyes kept returning to the distant light. Suddenly, the radio hissed and fell silent. The connection was lost. Great, she muttered. Probably atmospheric interference again. She felt cut off from the world. And then she heard the first sound. A dull metallic clang from right below her, as if someone had struck one of the steel supports with force. Sarah froze. Her heart began to pound. She slowly walked to the window and looked down, but saw nothing but darkness. Probably an elk, she tried to reassure herself. They sometimes scratch their antlers on the beams. She waited for a few minutes. Silence. The fear began to recede. She even chuckled at her own panic. 3rd season, and she was still spooked by every little noise. She returned to her desk, but couldn't relax. Half an hour later, she heard a new sound, and it was much worse than the first. Scrape. A slow, grating sound of metal on metal. It wasn't random. It was rhythmic, persistent. Scrape. Pause. Scrape. As if something huge with claws was slowly climbing up the support beam. The sound made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. It was deliberate. She rushed to the trapdoor in the floor, checking the heavy bolt. It was locked. The scraping grew louder, closer, rising from the darkness. She switched off the light in the cabin, becoming one with the night, and huddled in a corner, clutching the dead radio like a lifeline. She prayed for the connection to return. Suddenly, the scraping stopped. An even more oppressive silence fell. Where did it go? Was it already here? She sat motionless, listening to every breath of the wind. 10, 15 minutes passed. Nothing. Maybe it fell. Or maybe it was just the wind swinging a loose cable. Yes, that was it. The wind. She slowly exhaled, trying to still the trembling in her hands. It was okay. She just had to make it to sunrise. The very moment she allowed herself to believe that, there was a soft tap right on the glass, a foot from her face. It wasn't a strike, it was a push, as if someone had poked it with a finger. But she was 100 feet in the air. She recoiled with a scream, and at that moment the entire tower shuddered from a massive impact. Books and maps flew off the shelves. The lamp overhead swung wildly and then went out with a pop, plunging her into total darkness. It was here, and it wasn't alone. She could hear them now. A heavy, scraping movement was coming from all 4 sides. They had surrounded her cabin. There was another push from the other side. The tower tilted precariously. The glass in the window opposite her shattered with a deafening crash, showering down into the darkness. A cold wind rushed into the cabin. She understood their plan. They weren't trying to get in. They were trying to push it over. In pure animal terror and complete darkness, she fumbled for her desk and her logbook. The only thing she could do was leave a message. As the steel structure groaned and bent beneath her, and the impacts grew more furious, she frantically scrawled the last words she could think of. There was a deafening crack of tearing metal. One of the supports had given way. The tower tilted at a fatal angle. The last thing Sarah felt was a sense of weightlessness as the floor fell away from under her feet. When the ranger team reached the Two Forks lookout the next morning, they found a scene of unimaginable destruction. The 100-foot steel structure had been ripped from its concrete foundation and lay twisted on the ground as if crumpled by a giant hand. The cabin was smashed to pieces. Sarah's body was never found. The official report stated that microfractures in the structure and an abnormally strong gust of wind were the cause of the disaster, but the rangers who worked the site told a different story. They spoke of giant, inhuman tracks around the tower's base and deep gouges in the mangled steel left by something that couldn't exist in our world. And in Sarah's logbook, found among the wreckage, there was just one desperate entry on the final page. They're not climbing the tower, they're trying to push it over. Story 3. The Last Check-In. There are old motels, hidden on the shoulders of forgotten American highways. Their neon signs flicker in the night like tired ghosts, promising rest but holding stories within their walls that are better left unknown. Arthur was the night clerk at one such place, the Starlight Motel. In 40 years, he'd seen it all, but nothing could have prepared him for the last guests, who brought something more than just luggage with them. The Starlight was a relic of the past, a single-story, L-shaped building, a parking lot with cracked asphalt, and a humming ice machine. Arthur, a gray-haired man with tired eyes, spent his nights reading old detective novels under a dim lamp. It was raining that night, a cold, fine drizzle that blurred the headlights of passing cars into smudges. After 1 a.m., the road usually went quiet, but not tonight. Shortly before 2, a family minivan screeched into the parking lot. The door flew open, and a man, soaking wet and trembling, ran into the office. Behind him was an exhausted woman clutching a little girl of about 7, her face hidden by a hood. "A room! We need a room! Any room!" the man blurted out, throwing damp bills onto the counter. His eyes darted wildly, constantly checking the window that faced the highway. "Of course, sir. Room 7, at the very end," Arthur replied calmly, handing him a key. "Is everything—" "Thanks," the man interrupted, snatching the key, and the family vanished just as quickly, disappearing into the designated room. Arthur watched them go, feeling a cold unease tighten in his chest. They weren't just tired, they were terrified. Not even 5 minutes had passed when a long, black sedan, gleaming like a hearse in the rain, glided silently into the lot. It stopped directly in front of the office. A tall, unnaturally thin man in a black coat stepped out. He moved with a kind of predatory grace. As he entered the office, he brought the smell of ozone and a grave-like chill with him. "Good evening," he said. His voice was quiet, but resonant. "I'm looking for a family. A man, a woman, a child, in a blue minivan. Have they passed through here?" Arthur looked into the stranger's cold, indifferent eyes. Every one of his instincts screamed danger. He remembered the frightened face of the little girl. "No," Arthur lied, trying to keep his voice from shaking. "It's been a quiet night. You're the first I've seen in hours." The man stared at him in silence. The seconds stretched into an eternity. Then he gave a barely perceptible nod. "I see. If you do see them, tell them they are only delaying the inevitable." He turned and left as silently as he had arrived. Arthur only let out his breath when the car's red taillights had dissolved into the rain. He had saved them. He almost felt like a hero. But the relief was short-lived. The phone on the counter rang. It was an internal call from room 7. Arthur picked it up. "Hello?" There was silence on the other end, and then a low, distorted whisper like the sound of an old tape being played backwards, and a child's laugh, a chilling, inhuman laugh. Arthur dropped the receiver as if it were a snake. At the same moment, all the lights in the office flickered violently. The Starlight Motel neon sign outside the window exploded with a loud crack, showering the asphalt with sparks and plunging the parking lot into darkness. The icy cold that Arthur had felt from the stranger now surged in a wave from the motel building itself. He understood. The threat wasn't on the road. It was already here. There was a crash. Arthur looked out the window and saw the door to room 7 fly open with incredible force, thrown from the inside. The father of the family stumbled out of the doorway. His face was a mask of pure terror. He saw Arthur, raised a trembling hand, and croaked, It wasn't after us. It was in her. It was always in her! Behind him, in the dark opening of the room, two silhouettes appeared, the woman and the child, but they were standing wrong, their limbs twisted at unnatural angles. And when the girl lifted her head, it wasn't human eyes that stared back at Arthur from under the hood, but two glowing embers. The darkness inside the room spilled out like a black wave, consuming light and sound. It wasn't just a shadow. It was a living, tangible entity that rushed towards Arthur with a roar. He scrambled back from the window, managing to bolt the office door just in time. The entity slammed into the door, and the wood splintered. It wanted in. And at that moment, the parking lot was flooded with the bright light of headlights. The black sedan had returned. The tall man got out of the car, but this time he was holding an ancient lantern made of dark metal. He paid no attention to the creature roaring at the door. He walked calmly to the lantern and opened a small hatch. A soft silver light, not yellow, poured from the lantern, and it seemed alive. As the beam touched the shadow entity, it shrieked, a sound like the grinding of 1,000 broken bones. The darkness began to contract, flowing away from the door towards the lantern, like smoke into a vacuum. I saw the distorted silhouettes of the woman and child dissolve into the black stream. In a few seconds, it was over. Silence. The man closed the lantern's hatch. The light inside it was no longer silver. It was now pitch black. He walked to the office door. Trembling, Arthur unbolted it. The man looked at him, his face expressionless. "I don't hunt people," he said in his quiet voice. "I hunt what travels inside them. They found it in an old house. They let it attach itself to their daughter. I wasn't chasing them, I was chasing it. Your interference cost me time." He turned to leave. "Who are you?" Arthur managed to ask. The man paused for a moment. "Call me a conductor," he said. "I just collect the lost baggage." The man drove away, and this time he was gone for good. When the sun rose, there was no minivan, no bodies in the parking lot. It was as if nothing had happened. The police, called by Arthur, just filed a report for vandalism because of the broken sign. But Arthur knew the truth. He sold the motel a month later. They say that to this day, the temperature in room 7 is always a few degrees colder than in the others. And sometimes, late at night, if you listen closely, you can hear the faint sound of a child's laughter coming from the empty room. Silence doesn't feel so safe anymore, does it? Every rustle outside your window, every creak in an empty home. Now it means something. Which of these 3 stories got to you the most? Let me know in the comments. I'm genuinely curious to find out. If you enjoy these dives into the darkness and you want more, subscribe to the channel and be sure to hit that notification bell. That way, you won't miss the new stories that are already waiting to be told. Until then, sleep tight, if you can.